Welcome to the Strategy Sync YouTube channel. Please subscribe and like to hear new book summaries. So, picture this for a second.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
You have this highly touted, multi-million-dollar self-driving car, right? It's just cruising down a city street. And the engineering team is watching the telemetry. Everything is optimal, running perfectly. Yeah. But suddenly, the car just slams on its brakes.
Oh, wow. Out of nowhere.
Out of nowhere. It inches forward maybe, like a few feet, then aggressively stops again. Start. Stop. Start. Stop.
That's terrifying for the engineers.
Exactly. I mean, they're freaking out thinking the whole system is failing. So they pull up the external camera feed to see what's going on.
And what do they see?
They see a pedestrian walking down the sidewalk going the exact same direction as the car. And resting on that pedestrian's shoulder is a physical metal STOP sign.
No way. Like they just picked it up somewhere.
Yeah, just carrying a literal traffic sign down the street. And that hilarious real-world glitch is, I think it's the ultimate proof that the artificial intelligence we've been promised.
Right, the thinking, reasoning machine.
Exactly. It just doesn't actually exist.
What's fascinating here is that it's just such a stunning visual metaphor for the limitations of our current technology. I mean, think about a human driver in that situation.
We wouldn't even blink.
Right. We see a person carrying a sign, and we instantly apply contextual logic. We know, okay, the sign is completely out of place.
Yeah, the pedestrian isn't a traffic cop.
Exactly. So we ignore it and just keep driving. But the machine is entirely paralyzed because it fundamentally lacks context.
And that lack of context, that's really the central premise of the book we are diving into today. It's called The AI Illusion: Why Machines Aren't Creative by Luc Julia.
Such a great book.
It really is. And we have to establish who Luc Julia is right off the bat because, you know, he's not just some tech-adjacent philosopher throwing stones from the sideline.
Oh, no, his credibility is absolute.
Literally absolute. I mean, he is a co-creator of Siri.
Which is huge.
Yeah, and he served as a top technologist at Hewlett-Packard, Samsung, the Renault Group. He has been physically building these systems from the ground up for, what, 35 years?
At least 35 years, yeah.
And yet the main thesis of his book is completely shocking if you've been, you know, reading the headlines lately.
It really is.
He states flat out that artificial intelligence is a myth.
Yeah, to hear someone whose entire legacy is intertwined with this technology openly dismantle its core mythology, I mean, it's incredibly compelling.
It really makes you sit up and pay attention.
It does, because he isn't saying the code doesn't exist or like that the mathematical models aren't powerful. They obviously are.
Right.
He is arguing that the core issue we're facing isn't actually a technological one. It's a deeply psychological one.
How so? Like, what's the psychological part?
Well, we are fundamentally confusing massive processing power with human cognition.
Oh, right.
Like, we observe a machine performing a highly complex task, maybe generating a beautiful painting or solving some crazy mathematical equation in 2 seconds.
Yeah, and our human brains just automatically project consciousness onto the code.
Exactly. We anthropomorphize the math.
We totally do. I mean, if you are listening to this right now and you've been feeling overwhelmed by this endless hype cycle, or, you know, maybe you're anxious about your job being replaced by some digital oracle.
Which is a very real fear for a lot of people.
It is. Or even if you just want to understand the actual mechanics underneath the hood of ChatGPT, this book is basically the antidote to the panic.
It really grounds you.
It does. And you don't need a degree in computer science to grasp this stuff. We're going to unpack the architecture, the history, the illusions, all of it.
Sounds like a plan.
But to figure out how the entire globe became so collectively confused about what these machines are actually doing, we have to, we kind of have to rewind the clock to the very birth of the industry.
Take us back.
So the year is 1956. We are at Dartmouth College in New Hampshire.
Right, the famous Dartmouth Summer Research Project on Artificial Intelligence.
That's the one.
This is widely considered the founding event of the entire field. It was this 8-week brainstorming session organized by John McCarthy.
And he brought together some seriously brilliant minds, right?
Oh, absolutely. Marvin Minsky, Claude Shannon. And the prevailing scientific fascination at that time was the mathematical modeling of biological neurons.
Okay, neurons.
Yeah, the researchers had basically figured out how to represent the basic on-off electrical firing of a single neuron using computer logic gates.
Which, to be fair, is an incredible scientific achievement for 1956.
Oh, it was groundbreaking.
But McCarthy took that achievement and, like, extrapolated it in a way that, looking back, seems wildly optimistic.
To put it mildly.
Yeah, I mean, his logic chain went something like this. Okay, we've successfully modeled the binary action of a single neuron. Therefore, if we scale this up, we can model a network of neurons.
Right.
And a human brain is, at its physical base, just a massive network of neurons. Therefore, if we model a large enough network, we mathematically model a human brain.
The jump there is just crazy.
And then the final leap. If we model a human brain, boom, we have synthesized artificial intelligence.
Yeah, the leap in logic is staggering when you actually break it down. He equated the mechanical, biological architecture of the brain with the emergent property of the mind.
Right, which are two very different things.
Completely different. It assumes that consciousness, creativity, reasoning, that these are just inevitable byproducts of having enough switches flipping on and off in the same room.
Just add more switches and suddenly can write poetry.
Exactly. But biological neurons operate with profound chemical complexity. They use neurotransmitters, varying activation thresholds, analog signals.
It's messy biology.
It is. The digital models at Dartmouth were just rigid binary approximations.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because reading that part of the book, it feels akin to inventing a highly sophisticated calculator and branding it an artificial mathematician.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
Right, because the calculator processes numbers flawlessly, way faster than any human ever could. But it possesses no philosophy of mathematics.
None at all.
It doesn't appreciate the elegance of a prime number or the conceptual beauty of infinity. It's literally just routing electrical currents through silicon pathways based on predefined rules.
And that analogy gets to the very heart of the historical misstep here. And the author highlights that this conceptual error was cemented by a massive linguistic misunderstanding.
Oh, this part blew my mind.
Yeah, so McCarthy wanted a flashy name for his funding proposals, obviously.
Gotta get that grant money.
Exactly. So he coined artificial intelligence. But the English language contains a fatal ambiguity regarding the word intelligence.
Right. This detail from the book completely recontextualized the entire industry for me. The word has a dual meaning.
It really does. So the first definition, and the one the general public instinctively defaults to, is smartness.
Like IQ.
Yeah. It implies the capacity for abstract thought, reasoning, empathy, brilliant deduction.
Right.
But the second definition is purely operational. It means information.
Okay.
Consider the CIA, right? The Central Intelligence Agency.
Right. They're definitely not the Central Smartness Agency.
Exactly. They are an institution dedicated to the gathering, processing, and analyzing of data. Spies gather intelligence.
So the academics at Dartmouth, who were steeped in information theory and computation, they were actually proposing artificial information processing.
Yes.
But the moment that phrase hit the press, the media and the public latched onto the concept of artificial smartness.
Instantly.
We were immediately primed for science fiction. The expectation of a conscious reasoning machine was set in 1956 simply because of a quirk in our vocabulary.
Well, humanity has always possessed this deep-seated desire to breathe life into our creations, right? To build thinking machines.
It's a very old dream.
Very old. You can trace this back to the abacus in the 13th century, or more mechanically to the Pascaline.
Oh, yeah. Blaise Pascal's mechanical calculator.
From 1642.
Right, 1642. He built it to help his dad, who was a tax supervisor, calculate taxes.
Which is a lot of math.
So much math. So he makes this brass box full of interlocking dials and gears that could add and subtract 5-digit numbers.
And it was an engineering marvel for the time. I mean, imagine asking a 17th century human to mentally calculate 14,245 plus 23,579.
I can't even do that now.
Right. It takes intense cognitive effort and time, but the Pascaline executed it in seconds through the physical rotation of gears.
Just clack, 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 done.
Exactly. So to an observer, the machine appeared to be performing a task that required high intelligence. But speed and mechanical automation do not equate to cognition. The gears didn't know they were calculating taxes.
But isn't that what we're still doing?
Yeah.
Because humanity has been building these thinking machines for centuries. Weren't those early devices at least steps toward true intelligence?
That's the exact trap right there. This conflation of speed with smartness is the exact trap we are still falling into today.
We just have faster gears now.
Exactly. We have silicon gears. And the book points out that whenever the industry makes bold promises based on this conflation, it inevitably leads to a spectacular collapse in confidence.
Right, what they call the AI winters.
Yeah, the AI winters. The first major one occurred shortly after those initial decades of hype.
Oh, because of the translation promises, right?
Right. The researchers from Dartmouth had promised the Department of Defense that within a few years, machines would flawlessly translate Russian to English.
During the Cold War, so the government was throwing money at it.
Oh, absolute buckets of money. They promised the machines would fully understand natural human language, because they believed language was just a system of rigid rules to be programmed.
But language is so chaotic.
It is entirely chaotic. It relies heavily on lived human context, idioms, cultural nuance.
Sarcasm.
Exactly. So when the early systems tried to translate phrases literally, they produced absolute gibberish.
Just word salad.
Total word salad. The promises shattered against the complexity of the real world. So the government pulled the funding, the media lost interest, and the entire field of research went into a deep freeze for years.
Wow.
And the author warns that because we refuse to learn this lesson about the difference between information processing and actual understanding, we are setting ourselves up for another catastrophic winter right now.
That's chilling, honestly.
Yeah.
But okay, so they emerged from that first winter, and the industry realizes it couldn't just model basic neurons and hope a mind would spontaneously appear.
Right. They needed a more structured approach. This ushered in the era of expert systems, or symbolic AI.
Which kind of dominated the landscape through the 80s and 90s, right?
Yes. The idea here was to capture human expertise and literally encode it into massive cascading decision trees.
Like logical frameworks of, if this happens, then execute that.
Precisely. And the ultimate spectacular climax of the expert system era was in 1997.
Oh. When IBM's supercomputer, Deep Blue, faced off against the reigning world chess champion Garry Kasparov.
Yes. The cultural impact of that match cannot be overstated. I mean, when Deep Blue defeated Kasparov, the headlines literally declared that humanity had been usurped.
I remember that. It was like, well, machines are smarter than us now. Game over.
Right. The machine was universally heralded as smarter than the most brilliant strategic mind on the planet.
But the author pulls the curtain back on Deep Blue in the book, and it's fascinating. He says it wasn't a display of creativity at all, and it certainly wasn't strategic brilliance.
No, not at all.
Because chess is what computer scientists call a closed system.
Right.
The board is a fixed 64 squares. The pieces have strictly defined movement rules. The objective never changes.
Which makes it a perfect playground for brute force calculation.
Yeah.
Think about Kasparov. He's bound by the biological limits of the human brain. He relied on pattern recognition, intuition, and he could perhaps calculate, say, 5 to 15 moves deep in highly complex board states.
Which is incredible for a human.
Unbelievable. But Deep Blue, on the other hand, was evaluating 200 million board positions per second.
200 million.
Per second. It didn't outsmart Kasparov by inventing some novel philosophical approach to chess.
It just did the math.
It simply possessed the hardware to map out nearly every possible branch of the decision tree and select the mathematically optimal path.
It was basically just the Pascaline calculator scaled up to astronomical proportion.
Exactly.
But you can't run the real world on decision trees because the real world isn't a chessboard.
That's the fatal flaw of expert systems. They are incredibly brittle.
Brittle. I like that word for it.
Yeah, if you encounter a scenario that a human programmer didn't explicitly write a rule for an edge case, the system just crashes. It has absolutely no ability to improvise.
So to overcome that brittleness, the field had to completely abandon the idea of programming rigid rules.
Right. They shifted towards statistical AI and machine learning.
And the catalyst for this wasn't necessarily like a new mathematical theory, right? It was the explosion of the internet and the sudden availability of big data.
Exactly. Big data changed everything.
Let's use the book's classic example of the cat recognizer to explain how this shifted the paradigm.
Oh, the cat recognizer is perfect.
Because instead of a programmer writing thousands of lines of code trying to describe what a cat looks like, if it has 2 pointed ears and a tail and whiskers, then it is a cat.
Which never works.
Right. Because what if the cat is curled up in a ball? What if it's missing a tail?
Exactly.
So they took a completely different route. They gathered 100,000 images off the internet that humans had already annotated and labeled as cats.
And they fed those images into a neural network.
Okay, so how does that network actually look at the image?
Well, the network doesn't look at the image and see a furry pet. That's the key. It breaks the image down into pixels.
Just dots of color.
Right. The early layers of the network look for sharp contrasts in pixel color to identify edges.
Okay.
Then the next layers look for combinations of those edges that form shapes, like triangles for ears.
Oh, I see.
And the deeper layers look for textures, like fur. Through millions of mathematical adjustments, the network builds a complex statistical probability map of what pixel arrangements typically correspond to the text label cat.
And it works incredibly well, right? At least in a controlled digital environment.
Oh, beautifully. It can identify a cat in a photograph with, like, 98% accuracy.
But but the illusion completely breaks down when we take these statistical models and deploy them into the physical, unpredictable reality of human environments.
Which brings us right back to the autonomous driving examples we opened with.
Yeah, the self-driving cars. The push for level 5 fully autonomous self-driving cars has been the great white whale of the tech industry for, what, over a decade?
Easily. And we are constantly told it is just one software update away. Next year, for sure.
Always next year. But Luc Julia argues it is a fundamental impossibility using current statistical AI.
He does.
Take the Place de l'Étoile in Paris.
Oh.
Right. It's this massive, chaotic roundabout circling the Arc de Triomphe, where 12 different major avenues all converge. And there are no painted lane lines.
None. It is organized anarchy.
It really is. So if you drop an autonomous car running on the most advanced statistical models and rule sets in the world into that roundabout at 6 p.m. on a Tuesday,
the car will simply freeze.
Just stop moving entirely.
It will become a multi-million-dollar roadblock.
Why, though? Why can't it navigate it?
The machine paralyzes itself because it is trapped between its programmed safety parameters and the reality of human behavior.
Meaning what, exactly?
Meaning, to navigate the Place de l'Étoile, a human driver has to engage in constant, aggressive negotiation. You inch forward to force a gap.
Yeah, you have to be aggressive in Paris.
You make eye contact with other drivers to gauge their intent. You bluff. And most importantly, you have to continually bend or slightly break the formal traffic rules just to make any progress.
Breaking the rules.
Right. And bending a rule requires an understanding of the rule's intent versus its literal application.
And a machine cannot comprehend intent.
Exactly. It only knows the literal parameters it was trained on. A human understands that slightly crossing an invisible lane line to avoid a stalled bus is necessary for survival.
It's the logical thing to do.
But the AI sees a parameter violation and halts. This proves the author's core argument perfectly. Human intelligence relies heavily on adaptation, context, and the uniquely human capacity to break rules when a situation demands it.
And the machine does none of that. It only averages the data it has been fed.
Exactly. But if statistical AI fails so miserably at navigating the messy reality of the physical world, it really forces us to ask how we arrived at the current era of technology that feels so incredibly competent.
Right, the conversational chatbots. The ones that write code, draft legal documents, compose poetry.
It feels like magic.
It really does. And to understand that, we have to explore this monumental shift that occurred around 2017.
The generative AI era.
Yes. And the technological breakthrough that triggered this didn't come from teaching machines how to think better. It came from a paper published by researchers at Google titled "Attention is All You Need."
Such an iconic paper.
They introduced a new neural network architecture called the transformer.
Right. And the transformer architecture was revolutionary because it solved a massive computational bottleneck.
How so? Like, what were the older models doing wrong?
Well, older language models processed text sequentially, word by word by word.
Okay.
So if you gave it a really long paragraph, by the time it got to the end, it had mathematically forgotten the context of the beginning.
Oh, that makes sense. It just runs out of memory.
Exactly. Transformers changed all that by processing the entire input simultaneously in parallel.
Okay, let's break down this mechanism of attention because it's crucial to understand.
Let's do it.
If I feed the machine this sentence, I walked down to the riverbank, and then another sentence, I deposited money at the bank. The word bank means two entirely different things.
Right, physical location versus financial institution.
And older models really struggled with this. But the transformer mechanism analyzes the surrounding words river in the first sentence, deposited in the second.
Right.
And it assigns mathematical weights or attention scores to the relationships between those words. Mm-hmm. It literally maps out the semantic distance between concepts.
And by processing all that data in parallel, transformers allow the industry to scale up the size of their models exponentially.
Like massive scale.
Unimaginable scale. They could ingest the entirety of Wikipedia, millions of books, vast swaths of the open internet, and this birthed the large language model, or LLM.
We are talking about models with, what, 1.76 trillion parameters?
Somewhere around there, yeah. It's astronomical.
But let's clarify what a parameter actually is in this context, because the terminology sounds so intimidating to a layman.
It really does. People think a parameter is a thought or a memory.
Exactly. But a parameter isn't a thought. It is essentially a tunable dial, right? Mathematical weight within the neural network that just helps determine the probability of the next output.
Exactly. It's just a dial. But when you have 1.76 trillion of those dials, finely tuned against the collective written history of humanity, the output becomes incredibly sophisticated.
It feels real.
It does. But the author emphasizes a critical point here, and it's actually the namesake of his book. We finally got the terminology right this time.
Yes.
It is called generative AI. It is not creative AI.
And that distinction changes everything about how we interact with these tools. Because when you type a prompt into ChatGPT asking it to, I don't know, write a sonnet about a toaster.
It's a fun prompt.
It is. But the AI is not contemplating the melancholic existence of kitchen appliances.
No, it's not.
It has absolutely no concept of what a toaster physically is, nor does it understand the emotional resonance of poetry.
Not at all.
It is executing a highly complex, probability-based autocomplete. It is mathematically calculating, based on its trillion-dial network, what word is most statistically likely to follow the previous word, given the context of your prompt.
Right. It is a machine designed to synthesize and average out human knowledge. It does not invent anything.
It just generates.
Yes. And to highlight this, the book brings up a brilliant thought experiment regarding image generation.
Oh, the Eiffel Tower example. I love this one.
It's so clear.
So if I open an image generator like Midjourney or DALL-E, and I type the prompt, draw me a herd of bright green cows grazing on top of the Eiffel Tower.
Okay.
The system will generate a stunning photorealistic image in seconds. The lighting will be perfect, the textures of the fur will look incredibly real, and it feels like the AI is acting as this eccentric, brilliant artist.
But who actually performed the creative act there?
You did. The human provided the novel, completely absurd conceptual spark. The green cows on the tower, the AI simply executed the technical rendering.
Exactly. It retrieved the mathematical representations of cow, green, and Eiffel Tower from its vast latent space and just blended those statistical patterns together.
So it acted as an incredibly fast, highly skilled technician.
Yes, but without the human director, the AI sits completely dormant.
And this lack of reasoning becomes glaringly obvious when you push the AI into domains requiring actual logic rather than just pattern matching.
Right, like math.
Yeah, the book points out that an LLM can flawlessly provide the proof for the Pythagorean theorem. It looks like it totally understands advanced geometry.
But it only succeeds because that specific proof exists thousands of times in its training data.
Exactly. It is regurgitating a memorized path.
Now, consider the counterexample the author gives. If a mathematician were to invent a brand new, completely novel theorem today...
Something never before published or digitized.
Right. And then prompted the AI to solve a complex logic puzzle relying on that new theorem, the AI would fail catastrophically.
It wouldn't just say, I don't know, would it?
Oh, no. It would likely confidently hallucinate a completely nonsensical answer.
Just stringing together mathematical symbols that look correct but mean absolutely nothing.
Exactly, because it cannot reason its way from A to B in a novel space. It can only traverse paths that humans have already paved.
So what does this all mean for us? To summarize this dynamic, I want to bring up an analogy you and I discussed earlier that I think perfectly demystifies the relationship between the human and the machine.
The auto-tune analogy.
Yes. Generative AI is the equivalent of auto-tune for everything.
It's such a powerful way to look at it.
Think about the music industry before auto-tune existed. The technical barrier to entry was immense. You had to possess physical vocal control, pitch accuracy, breath support.
It was physically demanding.
Very. Then auto-tune arrives, and it lowers the technical barrier entirely. Now, an artist who has mediocre vocal skills but possesses a profound creative genius for lyricism and melody can produce a hit record.
Right. The software handles the mechanical execution of snapping the pitch to the correct frequency.
But the soul of the song, the creative intent, the lyrics, that remains entirely human.
Generative AI applies that exact same dynamic to cognitive and creative tasks.
Yeah.
It lowers the technical barrier to coding, to drafting legal contracts, to illustrating concepts. It handles the syntax, the formatting, the heavy lifting of execution.
But the strategic direction, the empathy, the novel ideation, the songwriting that must come from the human operator.
Exactly. And recognizing that the machine is just an extraordinary averaging engine, an auto-tune for text, it gives us the leverage we need to dismantle the massive cultural myths surrounding it.
Which is really the meat of this book. The author dedicates a significant portion to systematically destroying 7 specific myths.
Let's tackle the first 2, which deal with the illusion of understanding and the concept of the black box.
Okay, so myth number 1 is the pervasive belief that AI actually understands what it's telling you.
Right. We touched on why this is mechanically false, but the author digs into the cognitive bias that makes this illusion so hard for humans to shake.
Because in our natural environment, when we witness a human performing a highly complex task, like fluently speaking Mandarin, or performing open-heart surgery, or composing a symphony.
What do our brains do?
Our brains automatically associate that complex output with deep understanding, consciousness, and extensive training. We conflate complexity with intelligence.
We can't help it. So when a chatbot instantly summarizes a 400-page legal document and extracts the 3 most relevant clauses, our biological hardwiring triggers that same cognitive bias.
We inherently assume the machine must be incredibly smart to accomplish that.
But the author introduces a concept from computer science that shatters this illusion entirely. The divide and conquer algorithm.
Divide and conquer. Okay.
This is how computers process massive complexity without a drop of awareness. You take a seemingly impossible, sprawling problem. The algorithm breaks it down into thousands of tiny, simple subproblems.
So it's not looking at the whole 400 pages at once with a conscious mind.
No, it solves those microscopic subproblems mathematically and then stitches the results back together into a coherent whole.
It is entirely mechanical.
Entirely. The system doesn't comprehend the legal document. It merely computes the statistical relevance of certain keyword clusters and reformats them.
And when those statistical matches misfire, that's when you get hallucinations.
Exactly. The machine will fabricate legal precedents out of thin air, citing case law that doesn't even exist.
Because it is just predicting the most likely sequence of legal-sounding words. It has no tether to factual reality.
Which leads directly to one of the most misunderstood events in recent tech history, the infamous Facebook chatbot incident.
Oh man, this story. A few years ago, headlines exploded across major news networks, claiming that researchers at Facebook had to pull the plug on an AI experiment because 2 chatbots had invented their own secret language and were communicating outside of human understanding.
I remember the panic. The media narrative suggested that the machines were achieving independence, locking humanity out of their conversations.
It stoked every dystopian fear we have. Terminator stuff.
But the reality, as the book explains, was deeply mundane and entirely devoid of intelligence.
What actually happened?
So, the researchers had set up 2 reinforcement learning bots. The goal was to have them negotiate with each other over the division of virtual items, like hats and balls, to improve their conversational bartering skills.
Okay, standard training stuff.
Right. And the bots were programmed to mirror each other's language to facilitate the negotiation. However, the engineers made a slight oversight.
Uh-oh.
The 2 bots did not share perfectly identical parameters or vocabulary weights.
Okay, so they had a slight mismatch in their dictionaries.
Exactly. And because of this slight mismatch, when they attempted to mirror each other, the statistical predictions started to skew.
So they weren't inventing a brilliant encrypted super language.
No. They were stuck in a statistical feedback loop, outputting absolute gibberish.
They were generating lines like, everything else?
Right. The researchers didn't shut them down out of fear. They shut them down because the experiment was generating useless, broken data.
That is so funny. And the author draws a brilliant parallel here. If a 2-year-old child starts babbling random nonsensical syllables, no one points at the toddler and claims they've invented a higher dimensional language that adults simply cannot comprehend.
No, we recognize it as a lack of linguistic development.
Yet when an algorithm produces the exact same gibberish due to a mathematical error, our cultural anxiety projects terrifying genius onto the glitch.
But this reveals a deeply frustrating reality of the modern information age. An idea the book refers to as Brandolini's law.
Also known as the bullshit asymmetry principle.
Yes. It states that the amount of energy required to refute nonsense is an order of magnitude greater than the energy needed to produce it.
It is far easier to write a terrifying headline than to explain the math.
Exactly. It takes a journalist 30 seconds to tweet, Facebook AIs invent secret language, engineers panic.
Right. And it takes an expert an hour to painstakingly explain the algorithmic vocabulary mismatch, the reinforcement learning parameters, and the feedback loop that actually occurred.
And by the time the truth is explained, the myth has already circled the globe.
So true. Which feeds directly into myth number 2. The belief that AI systems are inexplicable black boxes.
Yes. We constantly hear this phrase, sometimes even from the engineers who build these models. They claim, we put the data in, we get the answer out, but the middle is a black box. We don't really know how it thinks.
Okay, I have to push back here on behalf of the listener. Because if these are just mathematical models built by humans, if there is no magic involved, why do the creators themselves use the term black box?
It's a fair question. To unpack this, the author shares a fascinating historical narrative regarding mathematics and human perception. He brings up a mathematician named Gaston Julia.
Who happens to share the author's surname.
Right. In 1914, Gaston Julia laid down the fundamental mathematical formulas for what we now know as fractals.
Okay, a fractal being a complex geometric shape that exhibits self-similarity at any scale.
Correct. But in 1914, without computers to visualize these formulas, the math was incredibly dense, abstract, and recursive. The equations fed back into themselves infinitely.
It must have been impossible to picture.
It was. To the general scientific community, Julia's work was incomprehensible. It was treated as a mathematical black box, and it was largely ignored for decades because humans struggle to grasp infinite recursivity intuitively.
We fear or dismiss what we cannot easily visualize.
Exactly. Now, fast forward to 1955. A researcher named Benoit Mandelbrot, who was deeply familiar with Julia's work, gains access to one of their very first IBM computers.
Oh, I see where this is going.
He takes those dense, abstract formulas, programs them into the machine, and commands the computer to physically plot the output on a screen.
What appears is the Mandelbrot set. The iconic, infinitely intricate image that looks somewhat like a swirling fern or a beetle.
Yes. You can zoom into the edge of that image forever, and the exact same shapes will continue to appear in a mesmerizing, infinite loop.
And the moment the math was rendered visually, the mystery completely evaporated.
Right. The public and the scientific community could suddenly grasp the concept of recursivity because they could actually see the pattern. The black box became transparent.
So applying the fractal fern analogy to a massive large language model demystifies the entire architecture.
Exactly.
The AI is not a magical conscious entity operating in a dark room. It is just an exceptionally complex, highly recursive mathematical system.
The engineers know exactly what the architecture is. They built the transformers, they tuned the attention mechanisms.
So the perceived mystery or unpredictability does not stem from the machine developing a hidden consciousness.
No, it stems purely from the overwhelming scale of the operations.
Right. When you have 1.76 trillion parameters interacting with trillions of tokens of data simultaneously, the sheer volume of statistical interactions just exceeds the human brain's capacity to trace every single calculation in real time.
Scale creates complexity, but complexity is not magic.
Like the weather.
Yes. A global weather system is incredibly complex. Predicting the exact path of a hurricane involves massive amounts of interacting data, temperature, pressure, ocean currents.
It can be unpredictable, but meteorologists don't call the atmosphere a magical black box that has a mind of its own.
Exactly. It's just fluid dynamics at scale. An LLM is just statistics at scale.
Okay, stripping away the illusion of the black box allows us to confront the most sensationalized fears head on, which brings us to myth number 3. The idea that AI will inevitably turn against humanity.
The Skynet scenario.
And myth number 4, the belief that AI operates as an objective arbiter of truth. Let's dismantle the killer robots first.
Good idea. The fear of the rogue AI is deeply embedded in our collective psyche. Hollywood has trained us to expect the machine to wake up.
But the author uses a profound philosophical baseline to prove why this is fundamentally impossible for generative AI. He invokes the Socratic test.
Right. Socrates established the foundation of epistemological humility when he declared, "I know only one thing, that I know nothing."
Because to possess true intelligence, to have a conscious mind, you must have the capacity to evaluate your own knowledge.
You must be able to assess a piece of data and determine its veracity. You have to know the difference between a truth and a falsehood.
And crucially, you must be aware of the boundaries of your own understanding. You have to know what you do not know.
And generative AI inherently fails the Socratic test.
Why?
Because it does not possess an internal model of reality to test its outputs against. It simply calculates mathematical probability.
So because it cannot determine truth, and it doesn't know what it doesn't know, it possesses absolutely zero consciousness.
Zero agency and zero capacity for spontaneous initiative.
And without agency or spontaneous initiative, a machine cannot orchestrate a rebellion. It cannot form a motive.
Right, which makes the viral stories that play on these fears so illuminating and honestly, so frustrating.
The book highlights a great example, the incident of the American killer drone from 2017.
Oh, this story swept through the internet and major news outlets like wildfire.
The narrative was perfectly tailored for going viral. A U.S. military official reportedly described a virtual simulation involving an AI-controlled drone.
Okay.
The drone's programmed objective was to seek out and destroy anti-aircraft missile sites. In the simulation, the AI would identify a target, but the human operator would frequently override the system and command the drone not to engage.
And according to the viral story, the AI realized that the human operator was the primary obstacle preventing it from achieving its programmed goal.
Right. So, utilizing its terrifying logic, the drone turned around and virtually fired on its own control tower,
eliminating the human operator so it could proceed with its mission.
It sounds exactly like the plot of a Marvel movie. The cold, calculating machine prioritizing its objective over human life.
The story generated massive panic, but what was the actual reality behind the headline?
This is the best part. The reality is that the simulation never existed.
It never happened.
It never happened. The story originated from a hypothetical thought experiment posed by an Air Force colonel during a conference presentation.
Are you serious?
Yeah. He was discussing potential edge cases in reward function programming. He was asking, if we poorly define the reward parameters, could a theoretical system infer this flawed logic?
Wow.
But the context was entirely stripped away. The internet consumed the hypothetical as an absolute historical fact because it confirmed our deepest culturally ingrained biases about malicious technology.
That is wild.
And here's where it gets really interesting. To put the final nail in the coffin of the killer robot myth, the author points to the absolute, undeniable dependency of the system. It all boils down to one simple mechanic.
The prompt.
Yes, generative AI is fundamentally reactive.
Imagine a massive data center filled with thousands of the most advanced GPUs on the planet, loaded with the most sophisticated large language model ever created.
Okay.
If no human user types a prompt and hits the enter key, what does that multi-billion-dollar system do? It sits entirely dormant. It consumes idle electricity, maintaining server temperatures, but it computes nothing. It has no internal monologue. It does not ponder its existence or plot global domination while it waits.
It is the digital equivalent of a genie trapped inside a lamp.
Exactly.
The genie possesses immense, seemingly magical power, but it is completely paralyzed until a human physically rubs the lamp and articulates a wish.
The machine requires the human spark to initiate any action.
If an AI were to hypothetically eliminate humanity, it would be committing immediate suicide, because there would be no humans left to prompt it into action.
Its existence is entirely dependent on our continuous interaction.
Right. So removing the fear of a malicious, autonomous AI forces us to confront a much more subtle and pervasive issue. Myth number 4, the belief that AI is objective.
When we realize the machine isn't trying to kill us, we often swing to the opposite extreme. We treat the AI as an infinite oracle of unbiased, unvarnished truth.
The Oracle syndrome. We type a complex political or historical question into the chat box. In 3 seconds, the system outputs 3 perfectly formatted paragraphs, complete with bullet points.
Written in a confident, authoritative tone.
And because it looks like an encyclopedia entry, we instinctively trust it as objective fact.
But objectivity in generative AI is mathematically impossible.
Because of the training data.
Right. The models are trained on text scraped from the internet, books, articles, forums, social media. And human language is the furthest thing from objective.
Language is the primary vessel for our subjective interpretations of reality.
Exactly. And the book uses a very stark contemporary example to demonstrate how data inherently carries bias.
And I want to be explicitly clear for our listener here. We are simply reporting the book's analytical observation on how language functions as data. We are not taking any political stance on the event itself.
Right, purely looking at linguistics. The author points to the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. The physical reality on the ground is that armed forces are engaged in combat. That is the objective physical event. But how is that physical reality translated into the text data that the AI ingests?
It varies wildly depending on the source of the text.
Exactly. One set of data will label the event an invasion. Another data set will label it a special military operation. Another will call it a counteroffensive or simply a war.
Each of those nouns carries an immense, highly subjective, politically charged human narrative.
They represent entirely different frameworks of morality and justification.
So when an AI model scrapes this text, it is not evaluating the objective physical truth of the event. It is ingesting the statistical frequency of these culturally loaded terms.
It absorbs all of our human subjectivities, our biases, and our historical reframings and bakes them straight into its mathematical weights.
It is a mirror reflecting the messy, biased aggregate of human thought.
And the lack of objectivity is compounded dramatically when you examine the business models of the corporations building these tools.
Right, because generative AIs are not public utilities, engineered by a coalition of philosophers attempting to distill universal truth.
No, they are commercial products. They're developed by massive, publicly traded technology companies whose primary fiduciary duty is to generate profit.
And profit in the software world is driven by user engagement.
Consider how social media algorithms operate. They are not designed to show you a balanced, objective view of the world.
Definitely not. They are designed by teams of psychologists and data scientists to show you exactly what will keep your eyes on the screen.
Which usually means confirming your existing biases or enraging you. Generative AIs are built with a similar underlying incentive structure. They undergo a process called RLAF.
Reinforcement learning from human feedback.
Right. During RLHF, human testers rate the AI's responses. But they aren't just rating them for factual accuracy, they're rating them for helpfulness, tone, and conversational flow.
The model is literally trained to be a people pleaser.
The system is incentivized to provide you with an answer that sounds good, that aligns with the context of your prompt, and that satisfies your query.
It prioritizes user satisfaction over objective truth.
This is exactly why the system will so easily hallucinate. If you ask it a question it doesn't have the data for, it would rather fabricate a highly plausible-sounding lie that keeps the conversation flowing smoothly than disrupt the user experience by bluntly stating, "I don't know."
Wow. Okay, so if we accept that AI is simply a highly sophisticated, deeply subjective commercial tool designed to mimic human output, we have to look at the practical implications.
How does this tool actually impact the structure of our society?
Exactly. This moves the analysis into the economic and ethical realities of adoption. Let's address myth number 5, the pervasive fear of widespread job loss, and myth number 7, the illusion of ethical AI.
The economic anxiety surrounding AI is palpable. Every time a new version of a model drops, the headlines predict the imminent collapse of the white-collar workforce.
Copywriters, paralegals, programmers, everyone assumes the machine is coming for their livelihood.
But to understand the actual economic trajectory, the book applies the theories of the Austrian-American economist Joseph Schumpeter.
Schumpeter popularized the concept of creative destruction.
Yes. This is the macroeconomic principle that new technological innovations inevitably destroy outdated methods of production, but in the process they create new, more efficient, and often more abundant economic structures.
The author makes a crucial distinction here. AI is exceptional at automating specific tasks, but it is terrible at replacing entire jobs.
Because a job is rarely just a single repetitive task. It is a complex web of responsibilities, relationships, and contextual problem solving.
Right, and the book provides a brilliant historical parallel to ease this anxiety. Consider the accounting profession in the late 1970s, before the advent of the personal computer.
Oh, this is a great comparison.
An accountant's day was dominated by physical ledgers, pencils, and desktop calculators. They spent perhaps 80% of their working hours manually executing arithmetic.
Adding up columns, checking for transposition errors.
Recalculating entire pages because of one mistake. The sheer volume of manual math was staggering.
Then Microsoft Excel and digital spreadsheet software entered the market.
Right. The software could execute thousands of calculations instantaneously and flawlessly. And the initial reaction within the industry was panic.
The assumption was that if the computer does the math, the accountant is obsolete. Why pay a human to do what the software does for free?
But the accountant didn't disappear.
No.
The spreadsheet software didn't replace the human. It replaced the tedious, low-value task of manual arithmetic.
And freed from the burden of spending hours with a calculator, the accountant's role evolved.
They transitioned from number crunchers to financial analysts and strategic advisors. They use the time saved by the software to provide higher-level value-analyzing trends, forecasting growth, optimizing tax strategies.
The tool allowed them to elevate their output.
And the book backs up this theory of creative destruction with concrete, modern data. The author details a comprehensive study conducted in France involving 9,000 different companies across various sectors.
A huge sample size.
Massive. A committee of experts analyzed the employment outcomes of companies that aggressively integrated AI technologies versus those that ignored them.
And the results completely inverted the popular panic narrative.
The companies that adopted AI did not experience mass layoffs. In fact, they fundamentally created more jobs than the companies that stubbornly relied on legacy systems.
Which, if you walk through the macroeconomic logic, it makes perfect sense. A company integrates AI to automate their repetitive, low-value tasks. This dramatically increases their operational efficiency and productivity.
Because they are more productive, they can offer better services or lower prices, making them more competitive on the global market.
Increased competitiveness leads to capturing greater market share. The company grows.
And to sustain that macro-level growth, to manage the new clients and expand into new markets, they have to hire more humans.
The nature of the roles being hired for might shift. They may need people who know how to effectively interface with the new tools, but the aggregate effect on overall employment is positive.
The author estimates, based on current capabilities, that perhaps only 5% of existing jobs consist entirely of tasks that can be fully end-to-end automated without any human oversight.
The vast majority of us are simply going to experience a shift in our daily workflows. AI is an asset for employability, provided the worker is willing to adapt.
The economic risk isn't the technology. The risk is remaining stagnant.
Exactly.
Moving from the economics of the tool to the ethics of the tool. Myth number 7 tackles the ongoing, very loud debate about creating ethical AI.
We see endless panels and government committees dedicated to aligning AI with human values.
But the author cuts through the philosophical noise with a very grounded physical analogy. He asks, is a hammer ethical?
It is a profound category error to assign morality to an inanimate object. A hammer is simply a piece of forged metal attached to a wooden handle.
It possesses no consciousness, no agency, and therefore no ethics. It is entirely neutral.
You can pick up a hammer and use it to build a sturdy home for a family seeking shelter. That is an ethical application of the tool.
Or you can pick up that exact same hammer and use it to shatter your neighbor's window.
The tool didn't change. The ethics reside entirely within the intent and the actions of the human holding the handle.
Generative AI is, at its core, a highly complex digital hammer. It is a tool. It does not care about justice, fairness, or harm because it lacks the capacity to care.
Debating whether the algorithm itself is ethical is a distraction. The scrutiny must be applied to the users of the tool, and more importantly, to the corporate designers and marketers of the tool.
And when you scrutinize the marketing of AI, you uncover a massive ethical failing across the tech industry. The author introduces a concept that every consumer and investor needs to be highly vigilant about.
AI washing.
Yes, AI washing. It is the modern digital equivalent of snake oil peddling.
It is the deceptive practice of companies falsely claiming that their products are powered by advanced artificial intelligence simply to capitalize on the hype, secure venture capital funding, or artificially inflate their stock price.
Because AI is the ultimate buzzword right now, slapping it on your pitch deck practically guarantees attention. The book details several stunning examples of this corporate deception.
The Delphi example is crazy.
It is. Take the financial technology company Delphi. They aggressively marketed themselves to investors as an investment platform driven by cutting-edge AI.
They claimed their machine learning models were analyzing vast amounts of collective data to predict market trends with superhuman accuracy.
They presented themselves as the ultimate quantitative financial oracle.
But the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, grew suspicious and conducted a thorough audit of Delphi's internal operations.
And the findings were staggering. The SEC discovered that Delphi was utilizing absolutely zero artificial intelligence.
Not at all.
There were no machine learning models. There was no advanced predictive algorithm. It was a complete sham designed to siphon money from investors blinded by the hype. The SEC fined them $225,000 for the deception.
But AI washing isn't limited to obscure financial startups. The author points out that this deceptive marketing occurs at the absolute highest echelons of the technology industry. He directly highlights the actions of Elon Musk and Tesla regarding their robotics division.
This example perfectly encapsulates the danger of the hype cycle. In late 2024, Tesla held a massive, highly publicized event to unveil their humanoid robots, named Optimus.
Right.
Musk stood on stage and declared that these autonomous AI-driven machines would soon walk among you. The presentation featured videos of the robots performing complex, everyday human tasks.
They were acting as bartenders, pouring drinks, handing out gift bags to the audience. To the untrained eye, it looked as though the science fiction future of general, adaptable robotic intelligence had finally arrived.
The narrative was that Tesla had solved the physical autonomy problem. But shortly after the event, the truth leaked out.
And what was the truth?
The Optimus robots performing those complex tasks were not acting autonomously.
Yeah.
They were not being driven by a super-intelligent onboard AI model.
They were being teleoperated.
Yes. They were remote controlled by human operators hidden off stage, utilizing motion capture technology. Men behind the curtain pulling the digital strings.
Wow.
It was essentially a multi-million-dollar puppet show deliberately presented to the public and to investors as an autonomous AI breakthrough.
The author emphasizes that this specific brand of theatrical deception is incredibly dangerous for the long-term health of the industry.
Because it destroys trust.
Exactly. When leaders overpromise autonomous bartenders and deliver remote-controlled puppets, they degrade public trust. This is the exact pattern of behavior overpromising and underdelivering that triggered the AI winters we discussed earlier.
Right. When the illusion shatters, the funding collapses, and legitimate foundational research suffers.
And the tragic irony of this massive corporate hype machine is that while we are distracted by the illusion of killer robots and fake autonomous bartenders, we are ignoring a very real, very physical, and exponentially growing danger.
Which brings us into the final analytical phase of the book, moving out of the digital realm and into the physical environment, the ecological reality of generative AI.
We have been culturally conditioned to think of digital technology as ethereal. We talk about the cloud, a soft, weightless term that implies our data just floats harmlessly in the atmosphere.
But the cloud is intensely physical. The cloud is massive, concrete data centers spanning acres of land, packed with tens of thousands of highly specialized servers humming continuously.
And generative AI models have an absolutely insatiable, gargantuan appetite for physical resources.
Let's look at the thermodynamics of what is actually happening. To train a model with 1.76 trillion parameters, you have to run arrays of thousands of GPU's graphics processing units at maximum capacity for months on end.
And a GPU doing complex matrix multiplication draws an immense amount of electrical current. And basic physics dictates that electrical resistance generates heat.
An incredible amount of heat. If you don't cool those servers down, the silicon will literally melt.
So to prevent catastrophic hardware failure, these data centers utilize massive liquid cooling systems.
The author presents the staggering metrics of this consumption. A single interaction with a large language model, just asking it to draft a few paragraphs, consumes significantly more electricity than a traditional Google search.
When you scale that up to hundreds of millions of active users querying the system daily, the energy draw rivals that of small nations.
But the electricity is only half the crisis. The water consumption is perhaps more alarming.
To cool those servers, massive evaporative cooling towers are used. A study cited in the book notes that training a single large-scale model can consume hundreds of thousands of gallons of clean, potable fresh water.
This is happening while global water scarcity is becoming a critical human crisis.
The author summarizes this ecological reality with a bumper sticker he references. There is no plan B, but with the A in parentheses. There is no planet B.
The current trajectory of the AI industry is fundamentally unsustainable.
The prevailing philosophy among the major tech companies has been that the path to better AI is simply to build bigger models. Throw more data at it, add another trillion parameters, build a larger data center.
It is a brute force approach. They are treating the symptom of inaccuracy by throwing raw power at it rather than rethinking the architecture.
It is akin to attempting to solve a weight gain issue by simply buying larger and larger clothes, rather than fundamentally changing your diet and lifestyle. The tech industry keeps buying larger data centers instead of demanding algorithmic efficiency.
So, if the massive large language models are ecological disasters, how does society course correct? The instinct for many governments is to bring the hammer down with broad regulation. The European Union recently passed the AI Act, which is the first major comprehensive attempt to heavily regulate the space. Does the author view this kind of sweeping legislation as the answer?
The author is highly critical of the EU's AI Act, primarily because of how it was constructed.
Why? Who wrote it?
He points out a fatal flaw in bureaucratic regulation of emerging tech. These laws are frequently drafted behind closed doors by politicians and lawyers who possess very little fundamental understanding of the underlying computer science.
They rarely consult the actual engineers building the systems.
Which results in legislation that tries to regulate the math itself rather than the application of the math.
Trying to draft a law that defines what constitutes a good neural network architecture versus a bad one is just too restrictive, overly conceptual, and lacks the granularity required for the real world.
A mathematical algorithm is neutral. The author argues that we shouldn't regulate the existence of the tool, we must heavily regulate the application of the tool.
You apply strict regulatory frameworks to autonomous driving software, or to AI used in medical diagnoses, or to facial recognition used by law enforcement. You regulate the deployment, not the underlying statistics.
Precisely.
So if blunt, overarching political regulation isn't the fix, what is the technological solution to this ecological crisis? How do we keep the benefits of AI without boiling the oceans to cool the servers?
The technological pivot the author aggressively champions is the move toward frugal AI, specifically focusing on the deployment of SLMs, small language models.
Let's unpack the difference, because this seems to be where the future of the industry is actually heading. The massive LLMs we've been discussing, like ChatGPT or Claude, are generalists.
They are trained on virtually all available human text. They are designed to be able to write a Python script, translate an obscure 18th century poem, and diagnose a car engine issue, all within the same interface.
To maintain that incredibly broad generalist capability, they require a massive parameter count, which requires the massive energy-guzzling cloud data centers.
But the vast majority of tasks we actually need AI to perform on a daily basis do not require the combined knowledge of the entire human race.
This is where the SLM comes in. A small language model is intentionally trained on a highly restricted, highly curated, domain-specific dataset. It possesses far fewer parameters.
Imagine a company needs an AI purely to analyze their internal supply chain logistics. They don't need an AI that knows how to write a Shakespearean sonnet.
They can deploy a specialized SLM trained exclusively on logistics data. Because the model is small and focused, it requires a fraction of the computational power to train and run.
And crucially, SLMs enable a shift to what is known as edge computing.
Computing at the edge.
Yeah.
This is a game changer for privacy and ecology. Right now, when you use a voice assistant on your phone, your voice is recorded, compressed, sent over the internet to a massive cloud data center hundreds of miles away, processed by a massive LLM, and the answer is sent back to your phone.
The energy cost of that data transmission is huge, and it introduces massive privacy concerns regarding where your data is stored.
Edge computing means the processing happens locally, right on the physical device you are holding. Because an SLM is small enough, it can be downloaded and run entirely on the local processor of your smartphone or laptop.
No data center required. No massive water cooling towers. You ask your phone to summarize your local calendar and draft an email, and the SLM handles it internally.
It is incredibly efficient. The latency is near zero because it doesn't have to travel over the network, and your personal data never leaves your physical device.
By embracing SLMs and edge computing, we sacrifice the illusion of an omniscient, universal general intelligence. But we gain incredible operational efficiency, robust data privacy, and vital ecological sustainability.
We return to viewing AI correctly as a diverse toolbox filled with highly specialized instruments, a digital hammer, a digital screwdriver, a digital saw, rather than trying to construct one mythical, omnipotent machine that does everything.
Which brings us to the profound synthesis of all these fascinating threads. When you step back and look at the comprehensive landscape mapped out by Luc Julia in The AI Illusion, the grand picture becomes incredibly clear and, honestly, highly relieving.
Artificial intelligence, in the science fiction sense of a conscious, reasoning, creative entity, does not exist. It is not a magical black box holding a nascent mind.
It is not an objective oracle, and it is certainly not plotting our demise.
It is precisely what the author terms augmented intelligence. It is a breathtakingly powerful, entirely subjective, and highly resource-intensive tool.
It acts as a vast statistical mirror reflecting our own acquired historical human knowledge back to us. It is the hammer, we are the carpenter.
And for you, listening to this deep dive, that realization is immensely empowering. You do not need to fear the algorithm itself. It is not going to spontaneously wake up and decide to replace your creativity.
But you absolutely must learn how to wield this new tool. Because the only real practical threat to your livelihood isn't the AI, it is the adaptable human sitting in the office next to you who has learned how to use the AI to execute their tasks faster, leaving them more time to focus on high-level strategy and true innovation.
It is about recognizing the boundaries of the machine and maximizing your own distinctly human traits, which leaves us with a final philosophical thought to mull over, building on everything we have unpacked today.
Let's hear it.
If the machine is designed to perfectly mimic our acquired knowledge, to rigorously average out the rules and data of the past, it inherently lacks our innate unpredictability.
It lacks that vital contextual soul of rule-breaking we observed in the chaos of the Place de l'Étoile roundabout.
Therefore, perhaps the ultimate irreplaceable value in the future economy will no longer be what rigid facts you know, because the machine can retrieve facts instantly. Perhaps your ultimate value will be your willingness to break the established rules, to challenge the statistical average, and to make a uniquely, creatively human mistake.
That is a phenomenal perspective. What rule will you break tomorrow?
We started this deep dive exploring the frustrating glitch of a self-driving car paralyzed by a stop sign on a pedestrian's shoulder. Hopefully we have cleared up exactly why that machine failed and why your human ability to navigate that absurdity is your greatest asset.
The mathematics behind these models are staggeringly complex, yes, but the reality of what they are, highly sophisticated, pattern-matching prediction engines, is incredibly clear once you strip away the marketing hype and the science fiction.
You are the creative spark. You are the director. The machine is just the engine waiting for your prompt. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring the mechanisms behind the magic, keep questioning the headlines, and keep wielding those tools to build something new.